Welcome back to Green Mountain Mornings on WKVT 100.3 FM and AM 1490. 39 degrees outside, 8:21 on the clock for your Tuesday. And I have on the phone with me Chris Mays from The Reformer. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning, Olga.
And how are you doing over on the other side of the mountain today?
I'm good. I'm just, waiting for the snow to start falling and filling in the mountain.
That will be pretty. Yes, we always do get snow. I kind of miss that about living in Whitingham, is the beautiful snowfall we used to get.
Yeah.
So tell me, you have been reporting on a new collaboration between the New England Center for Circus Arts and a dance troupe.
Yeah, well, NECCA, the New England Center for Circus Arts, they just opened up a new building, which is huge. It's probably the biggest circus facility, I don't know, on the East Coast or even in the country. I forget all the details behind that, but with all this space, they have more room to invite other groups in. So this month they announced a bunch of new workshops with some circus coaches and a couple dance groups. And I work on Sundays, so I was able to go and check out the collaboration with Axis Dance Company. It's a group out of Oakland, California, but they work with people throughout the country. And on Sunday there were dancers from Massachusetts, from a bunch of different places up north, from around here in New Hampshire, and then, in town in Brattleboro and Dummerston. And it was amazing to see. It was dancers and circus performers working together and making this co-production. What's interesting about Axis is they work with people with disabilities and people without disabilities, but they work for advocating for dance and providing access to dance for everybody.
Oh, fantastic. And so just to clarify, I missed what you said earlier on. Was it a workshop or a performance that you attended?
Well, it was a workshop it was a workshop, but it was a performance that I attended. So it was,
okay.
They did this 2-day workshop and then had this co-production afterwards, which was kind of the artistic director from Access described it as an informal sharing, and Serenity from NECCA described it as a co-production, and it was great. I mean, the audience just loved it.
Oh, wonderful. Such a nice break from the more hard news stories, to be able to take in some new art and dance and movement.
Yeah, I went up to one of the performers afterwards, and she was one of the dancers, and she's been doing it for many years. She actually is missing one of her arms, and I went up to her and I told her how great it was to be able to come and see a performance like that, because so often my work is just at the desk or running to this interview or that interview, and I could really appreciate it. I don't know that much about dance, but I'll tell you what, I could really appreciate all the work that went into it and the collaboration. I should also note that people from the Southern Vermont Dance Festival were involved, as well as Nimble Arts, another circus group in town. So it had a lot of people.
Oh, fantastic. Are there other performances or other workshops coming up?
Yeah, there's a couple more. I forget the specifics of them, but there's another dance company coming later in the month, and then there's some circus guest coaches coming. Some people who have worked with Cirque du Soleil and some people who have worked with NECCA before are coming in to provide workshops. And then they have their own NECCA workshops where people can come in and learn a little bit about circus arts.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much, Chris, for bringing us up to date on some of the arts that are happening in our community. Moving on to the Deerfield Valley, you mentioned that Wilmington has an ordinance that just got voted down.
Well, yeah, it was actually approved by the select board, and then a resident named Jack Dolan, he came to the town with a petition signed by the appropriate number of people to signal a vote, and the vote was whether to reject the ordinance, and that ordinance included a ban on overnight parking in a South Main Street lot as well as another lot on Church Street in Wilmington, and a lot of the landlords, business owners, residents, they were concerned about people being able to move their car because the ban was something like, I think it was 2 a.m. to 6 or 7 a.m. But, when the voters rejected that, the select board on Wednesday night, they took that whole part out of the ordinance. So now the town is working with landlords and business owners, residents, the road crew, and the police department on coming up with an informal agreement on parking, because the big concern, the reason for the overnight parking ban was because of snow removal. They've had some issues getting cars out, and they have a 24-hour limit on the lots, and that's going to stay intact. But the road crew has voiced concerns, and they were there on Wednesday night, some of the employees, and they're still worried about how this whole thing is going to look as winter comes.
So it sounds like, just give us a little history on this ordinance. It sounds like it was a parking ordinance.
Yeah, it's a traffic ordinance, so there's a bunch of different things in there, but nobody took issue with anything except for this overnight parking ban. And there's still sections of town where there's going to be no overnight parking, but the big issue was the South Main Street lot. That was what got people up in arms.
And this is the lot, if I'm thinking correctly, over by Petit Memorial Library.
It's actually behind. It's basically behind Memorial Hall.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that one. Yes. And it goes along. It borders the Deerfield River.
Yeah.
Yep. So, who would have been most impacted by this ban on overnight parking?
Employees of the businesses, mostly the bars and restaurants that closed later, and also the residents. There's a bunch of apartments down there, and so landlords came out and business owners came out and they said, hey, this isn't going to work for our employees and residents, so can we work on something else? And there was nothing hostile about it. They just, the select board understood that, maybe this wasn't the best idea. And as soon as the ordinance got rejected, they went right to work at removing the language that was troublesome.
Oh, interesting. For those who aren't familiar, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong here, those who aren't familiar with downtown Wilmington, it's a small downtown, and it's actually quite compact in many ways, the CBD. And so in some ways there's a lot of parking, and in some ways there is not. And
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and so these lots like the South Main Street one that Chris is mentioning, they can be kind of prime parking areas.
Yeah, and one of the big issues was during the winter, it would be quite a walk for some of the residents if they parked in another lot. So that was at the heart of the issue as well.
Fantastic. So does the select board have a timeline for moving forward with correcting this ordinance or finding other solutions?
Well, they approved the changed ordinance. They revised the ordinance last week, but now the town manager, he's the new town manager in Wilmington, Scott Tucker. He says he's working with the different groups, the police department, the road crew, and all the property owners, business owners on coming up with some kind of agreement. And, the road crew is a little wary of it, but the town manager, I think he wants it to work for everyone.
Thank you for that, Chris. Straight ahead, we have your news with Natalie Knowles and sports with Fish. Chris and I will return after the break. Welcome back to Green Mountain Mornings on WKVT 100.3 FM, AM 1490, 40 degrees outside, 8:39 on your Tuesday, and I am your host, Olga Peters. Welcome back, Chris Mays from The Reformer on the phone. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. If you were here before the break, we had talked about some new workshops and programs going on at NECCA, as well as a parking traffic ordinance in Wilmington. But now we are moving on to Whitingham.
Yep. And the town is also named as a plaintiff in the complaint. And I just got the document. I just read through the document a little bit yesterday. It's I believe it's called a motion for an injunction, and it's a complaint combined, which is not always typical. I'm told from the attorney James Valente, who's representing the town and the two other plaintiffs. And they're basically saying this education funding formula that the state has is unfair to the taxpayer and to the student. It's providing they're calling it unconstitutional. They're saying that the student doesn't have the same opportunities other students have in the state because of the way that the money goes around and how taxes are paid. And it also points to some of the requirements that the schools have to abide by, and how that can be almost harmful for a place like Twin Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Whitingham students go to school with Wilmington students, but Whitingham filed this lawsuit on their own. They felt they had a better case because there's more development and potential for property taxpayers in Wilmington, so they went for this alone. But it all stems from the rejection of the budget during annual town meeting day in March. Both towns rejected the budget because they were seeing really, really significant increases for their school taxes. In Whitingham, the taxpayers were looking at more than 30 cents of an increase, and I believe that was something like an 18% increase over last year.
That sounds right. That's jogging my memory. And just for the listeners, Whitingham and Wilmington rejected their school budgets last year, but I think their municipal budgets passed.
Yeah, that's correct. And the school budgets passed on the second round. They revised the budget, but they didn't make any really big cuts. The school board made some really minor cuts, and then the voters supported it. And the idea back then was to send a message to the state.
Right.
And at the same time, at annual town meeting day, Whitingham voters approved of creating this legal fund to take on the state. And so they've enlisted the help of James Valente, an attorney in Brattleboro, and they're moving forward with it.
Yeah, I had a brief conversation with James when he came into the studio yesterday, and I have the complaint in my hand here, and I have yet to read it through because I just received it. But yeah, it's a application for preliminary injunction. And what James said that caught my attention, and so in full disclosure, I grew up in Whitingham, and I have family members who are part of the Board of Civil Authority and have also worked in the school system. They have not been a fan of Act 60 and the state's education funding system for a very long time. And when I asked James yesterday, I said, do you think this lawsuit's going to get traction? Because Whitingham, they've been complaining about Act 60 for so long. Are people stopping listening? And he pointed out, he said, Whitingham is getting hit so hard. So Whitingham has the middle and high school for Twin Valley, where
Hmm.
Wilmington houses the elementary school. And he said these Whitingham's getting hit so hard because it is too big to have some of the economies of scale that smaller schools might receive with the small school grants and that type of thing. But
Hmm.
it's too small to really benefit from numbers like BUHS might benefit as a regional high school. And
Yeah.
so their curriculum has become quite limited under Act 60.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what he said to me yesterday when we talked. And the lawsuit is amazing. All the data they've collected on what they and their argument for all the inequities going on right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a family member point out to me. Now, Whitingham just underwent quite a bit of renovation when it became the middle and high school. And yet she was
Yep.
pointing out to me some of the kind of regular maintenance that should be done that isn't getting done because of budget problems.
Yeah.
So it's not new for Whitingham.
Yeah, and James is expecting the state to send in their heavy brass when the when they have their hearing. He expects that will be in December.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm putting that on my calendar. It will be an interesting thing to watch and see what the state's response to their findings.
Yeah, yeah. I just made a note to myself. Hearing in December. um, well, it is interesting. I was talking earlier in the show how I'm struggling with how to vote on Act 46 and whether to say yes to the proposed merger or no. And some of my concerns are going back to Act 60 and how, as much as I love the philosophy behind it, in the states, and I really respect the state's efforts to create equity in
Yeah.
education, boy, I am not sure that this funding mechanism ever worked. And that's just my opinion. And Chris is being quiet because he's like, I'm a reporter. I can't have an opinion.
Well, I was just going to say you're not alone, and I talked with Representative Laura Sibilia, and she said it's way past time for this to be challenged, and I've heard I've heard concerns from her and other people over here in the Valley since I started working for the reformer 5 years ago. So it's interesting to see this lawsuit come about.
Yeah, that it's finally come to this point.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chris. We will be, I'll be watching this with bated breath. Um, and I'm sure my family member will be on the phone later today with all sorts of information.
Yeah.
Um, tell me a little bit about what you'll be watching in tonight's select board meeting in Brattleboro.
Well, there's a few things. For one is a $10,000 grant request from Groundworks Collaborative. They're moving their shelter over to Winston Prouty, and they say they have a budget shortfall that they want to close, and so they're asking the town for $10,000, and then they need about another $30,000, and they're hopeful in some other grants from other funding sources.
Mm-hmm.
This operation is going to be significantly more involved than what they've had in the past. They're going to have staff scheduled to work there. It's not going to be so volunteer based anymore.
Right.
And so the board is also talking about the diversity, inclusion, and equity actions that town manager Peter Elwell laid out for them in September.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to ask the board to formally adopt, a document that says we're going to do these things moving forward.
Oh, great.
And then there's the single-use plastic bag ban. They're having their second reading I'm not sure if they'll actually adopt the ordinance tonight. Last time there were some concerns from some of the proponents of the bag ban, saying it wasn't doing enough, that Brattleboro needed to be stronger.
Right.
And that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at Peter Elwell's memorandum that he sends out on the agenda. And yeah, it says, as far as the ordinance goes, it says potential motion to approve the amendments to Chapter 7 as presented. So, yeah, they may not vote on it tonight.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I just want to quickly go back to groundworks. It seems like, is it the cost of paying for staff that is causing them to need to seek extra money, or will they also need to make changes to the building? What else will this money be going towards? Do you know?
Well, as far as I know, there's going to be more capacity in this location, and they're going to be providing more services.
Okay.
I forget the exact number. I want to say they were operating on a $60,000 or $70,000 budget last year, and now this year it's a $200,000 budget.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure I'll hear about what all these costs are about tonight.
Well, I look forward to reading your article when it's ready for the Reformer.
Thanks.
So we are just about out of time, Chris. Anything you want to add or wish I had asked before I let you go?
No, we talked a little bit before off the air. I'm working on a story about Elliott Street and the changes going on there. A couple businesses have closed, including Metropolis and Restless Rooster. And, if anybody had input on, what it's been like on Elliott Street over the last few years, feel free to contact me at cmays, MAYS, at reformer.com.
Okay. Wow, I didn't realize that Restless Rooster was one of the places that closed.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, folks, if you have any information you want to share with Chris, reach out to him at The Reformer. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And I will talk to you in what, 2 weeks maybe?
Yeah.
We have some rescheduling to do because Mike will be joining the rotation on Tuesdays. So we will be welcoming Mike Fair to the rotation along with Harmony and Chris.